Good morning, everyone. Can you see and hear me okay? Beautiful good morning to you. My switcher's got a mind of its own this morning, so apologize for the confusion. Let's hope it behaves for the rest of our time together this morning. So I was trying to finish my preparations and keep an eye on the chat. Still people logging in here. Adil, if you didn't catch that, send me an email about your interest in translations, and I'll reach out to Ajahn Jayasara to see if there's anyone else working on Russian translations of Ajahn Chah's biography. That sounds exciting. I know he had quite a few translations teams, so working on that book, but I haven't heard of a Russian one, so that's nice. I have to be mindful to sip my coffee so I don't activate this highly sensitive microphone. So good morning, everyone. I think we have enough people here to go ahead and get started. Not much news this morning. Last couple days I mentioned there's a bhikkhu ordination, but most of the same people are all here today, so you've heard that already. We've got some rain on and off here. Things are looking really lush and green in our corner of the world. So my energy the last day or two is not what one would like it to be. So if I seem a little dull, there's probably physical reasons for that. But I had a really good night's sleep last night, and that's good medicine. So hopefully I'll be on the mend today. It is a bit of a challenge doing this every day. So it's a fun challenge, but it is a bit of a challenge 24/7. So yesterday we were talking and continuing to remind ourselves to reflect on the teaching on the 5 hindrances. And in particular, yesterday I was talking about the first of the 5 hindrances, kama chanda. So I'd be interested to hear how people relate to this and get a little more feedback today than I've had in previous days. Some of the standard translations are very off-putting. Lust and greed in particular, not exactly very relatable for people, especially people that are not monastics. And I think it's important to come up with language that really connects with us, and also, having studied and understand clearly what the concept is, because part of our conscious process of investigating these things, being a student of our own experience, does involve framing things with language and speaking to ourself to describe our experience, as well as speaking with others. And so it's good to come up with a language that you feel kind of comfortable with. When you get fluent in this, the language sometimes can subside in the background. There's oftentimes I'm sensing hindrances in myself, and I just recognize them, and I don't particularly feel the need for a word. But in conversation with other people, and sometimes even conversation with myself, I need language, and I'm quite conversant with kama, long A, M A, kama chanda is present in me, or sense desire. And that's what I tend to use when talking myself. So I see a few people sharing some things here. Lust and greed do the trick for me. Okay, well, if you're comfortable with that, that's good. Whatever does the trick. Subtle greed, desire, wanting, wishing, longing. And let's see, Jeet has attraction and aversion. So attraction for kamachanda and then aversion for vyapada, or ill will, the second of them. Desire, so Alexander's profiting desire. I think that's good, but desire can be tricky for people. But if we're talking about our own personal language, there's nothing wrong with that. Neediness. I like that because let's remember that a very literal translation of tanha and kama tanha is the first of the three roots of dukkha. The literal translation of tanha is thirst. And a lot of the language that I use in talking about these things, and what I consider the primary problem is, it's not just desire, it's need, it's neediness, it's thirst. It's a thirsting process or investment. So, I talk about being overly invested in the sense realm. So, in this analogy we talked about yesterday, wanting to move to a more pure and clear experience of ourself in the world. So it removes, entails kind of seeing that over investment. Like even the word passion can be good. So there's many places in the sutras where the Buddha is encouraging us to cultivate dispassion, and it comes up in relationship to describing the path and various dhammas. But we can relate this if we take the meaning of passion to be some state of unbalance, or my translation, overinvested. So overly invested. And what are we overly invested in? What is the taint or the tint or the coloration that this particular hindrance is bringing to our experience? It's seeing something as more attractive than it really is, more full of promise than it could ever really could be. And that kind of touches on, one of the other similes the Buddha talks about in contemplating this. It's like somebody who is under the influence of this first hindrance is like somebody who is in debt. So we have the water similes in talking about the hindrances, but we also have a whole nother set. And the one that relates to kama chanda is like one who's in debt. And why is one in debt? It's like, to me, this speaks to that level of seeing things as more satisfactory or more promising of our happiness and fulfillment than they ever really could be, understanding the nature of sense desire and sense experience, as well as understanding the characteristics of anicca, dukkha, and anatta, or ephemerality, uncertainty, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. So, and Ajahn Sona talks about demagnetizing yourself, like becoming like removing the liability to sort of be suckered into sort of thinking that things can bring us the contentment and happiness that we long for, that they can't. That's like to be magnetized in the positive direction, which is relating to this kamachanda. And then, of course, the negative would be referring to the second hindrance of vyapada, or ill will, aversion. We could lump in sort of aggravation, frustration in there. And a lot of it comes from just a transformed relationship to the sense realm, and a very common confusion between in the difference between pleasure and happiness. And I don't think the common person understands this very deeply. There is confusion that exists in our minds, and it's not just on a verbal, intellectual, rational sort of level. I mean, it's something that runs very deep in the mind. We equate pleasure with good. We equate pleasure with happiness. And pleasure does not equal happiness. It's understandable why there can be confusion in there, and we have a kind of deep conditioning to associate those things. But it's a really fertile ground for contemplation. Pleasure doesn't equal happiness. These two things are not equal. And kind of an exploration of how it is that you understand that, and what's the difference between pleasure and happiness. I mean, we confound the two, because when we experience emotional happiness, or a state that we could label as happiness emotionally, certainly that is a pleasant feeling that has pleasurable affect. And sometimes in the presence of that which we find pleasurable, that emotion is aroused in us, or you can say we finally allow ourselves to experience that emotion. Sometimes we're withholding permission to feel all kinds of things. We don't let ourselves feel joy and happiness. We don't let ourselves feel a sense of ease and contentment due to various views that we have on the world, and various cognitive and emotional habit patterns that we have. And it's almost if we're just like we're gamblers. We're waiting to win the lottery, or we're waiting for someone else to do something, or the environments which we live in to arrange themselves in some particular pattern before we allow ourselves to relax, feel happy and at ease, contented. And that's a difficult way to go through the world if you're looking for a more profound sense of happiness and completion, the joy of contentment. And so one really needs to kind of unpack what the dynamic is there, and what the relationship is to it there. I've talked before about how the Buddha talks about what is the gratification, the danger, and the escape. And this is some instructions he gives for investigating sense desire, kama chanda. And this simile of it's like being in debt aligns with my contemplation around it's our strategy. Like, if this is our strategy, like seeking happiness through pleasure, or through agreeable conditions in the sense realm, because those things only bring ephemeral pleasure, it's really beyond our control, because they are inherently dukkha, like unsatisfactory, we're mistaking what is pleasurable for well-being and happiness over and over again. And the taint is the mind is constantly oriented and arranged, and therefore our relationship with ourself with others, with the environment is such that we're kind of always on the look. We're always scanning. We're always over concerned with sense experience, because deep down we long for happiness and well-being. And I believe that's intrinsic to the nature of beings, especially human beings, as we long for completion, we long for contentment, we long for happiness. And the pleasure of the sense realm and some relative escape from the unpleasant dimension of the sense realm, it doesn't satisfy. And there's, over and over and over, the Buddha points in this direction and encourages us to investigate that. So when we either consciously or unconsciously haven't fully internalized that lesson, we're wrongly invested in the sense realm. And this is where this notion of being in debt comes, because we go from chasing one pleasure to another, and our sense of well-being and happiness is bound up with trying to get completion, satisfaction, and contentment, happiness out of that which ultimately can't give it to us. And it's the extreme example. If that is our sole strategy for happiness in the world, we're addicted. We're ever longing. We're ever dependent on something that can never really fully satisfy. And so, it's like, what's the experience? It's like you have a really good day. It lasts for a period of time, and then it's gone, and you're on the hunt again. How do I get back there? How do I get more of that? And so, we have to wake up and realize we've been doing this for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of our life. It's never worked. Why should we believe it ever will? And I'm sure many of you get this on some reason, at some level. That's why you're here. That's why you do your practice. That's why you study. But we haven't fully gotten it. And we haven't developed the conditions to remember that and have that like informing how it is that we invest our energy and our intention, our energy and attention in the things that are there in our life. So, yeah, that's my encouragement today. Come up with some language for this. It's good to have names for these things. So have your favorite translation for this so that you are at ease identifying it and even speaking about it to yourself and others, and also develop a sensitivity to it. So, yesterday our little experiment was rose-colored glasses, being able to remove those. So our effort to purify the mind through the practice of satipatthana, through the practice of sammasamadhi, gives us a taste of what it's like, a very clear, profound, deep taste of what it's like to be free from debt, and to be clear. And that really gives us a taste of a different strategy, like how we can have a different strategy for happiness. And it aligns with, even a lot of the secular interest in living the simple life. How much do you really need? And this is an interesting project for, I think, a human being who wants to mature spiritually, is to figure out how you can move down the feeding chain. Like, what do you need to be happy in the world? And no matter if you're a layperson or a monk or a Buddhist or not, it's great to cut your liabilities. It's great to learn how to be happy with less, happy with simplicity, with silence, happy with what it is that you have or what it is that life offers you. happy with your breath, happy to just apply yourself to working with the mind. You could call it the simple pleasures, but they're more than that. They're the more durable pleasures, the more Dhammic pleasures, you could say. So work on your language. A reminder to keep investigating this relationship between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure does not equal happiness. Maybe you should get that tattooed, like right on the wrist or something. Pleasure not equal to happiness. That would start a lot of interesting conversations, I'm sure. So, okay, well, I've been talking a lot, so let's. Kind of interesting to hear. I see some different reflections. Maybe I'll work in backwards fashion here. See, Carolyn has a little sharing for us here. My practice today will be noting delusion when a recognized hindrance comes up. Sounds good. Turn off that. The problem with sense desire is that there have been many times in my life when it seemed to work, but it never lasts. Yeah. True, your phase desire structures is very useful for highlighting patterns. Desire structures. Yeah, I don't know how I came up with that. Probably from the words of another. Sense of debt helps a lot. Yes. That's a good investigation right there. Why does the Buddha say that? How is kamachanda like being in debt? And kamachanda, for me, tight focus, excluding all else, careless hunger, insatiable emptiness, base of skull, mind. So, Holly, I guess you're describing how it is that you notice that. You notice that as hunger, a sense of insatiable discontent. So slightly off. Zuri's got a question here. Is the PTS dictionary worth having on one's bookshelf? Well, I think so, but maybe not for everyone. It's rather expensive, but a fascinating book, especially the newer edition, which I don't know if it's fully complete. They've been working on it for years, and there's a couple volumes to the newest edition. The older edition is available freely online. I think they put it in the public domain, though. So, and let's see, Frank's got a translation for us here. Craving works for me, both for the beautiful and for trying to get away from the ugly. I think craving's a bit broader, though. But yeah, that can work. I mean, kama chanda, is, I think, nearly identical to what the Buddha is pointing to as kama tanha. So, in the Second Noble Truth, the Buddha identifies the three roots as kama tanha, bhava tanha, chanda tanha. Sorry, I got distracted. Vibhava tanha, kama chanda, bhava tanha, and vibhava tanha. So the three thirstings, the three cravings, the three roots of dukkha. Okay, and Scott has a nice reminder for us here. I've been recognizing my sense desire and reminding myself it's the monkey mind swinging from branch to branch, consuming things. that didn't satisfy me in the past. Why trick myself? That was nice. I like to be reminded of that. Thank you, Scott. Ajahn in the retreat talked about the monkey mind, which most oftentimes we identify with just the proliferative nature of the mind, the restlessness of the mind, the incoherence, if you will, of the mind, the ability for it to be stable and lucidly focused, not necessarily on one thing, but, shaking and disperse. And Ajahn had uh, a beautiful interpretation of the monkey mind swinging from branch to branch, a monkey who's hungry. He's in debt. He's hungry. He's on the prowl. He's searching around, scavenging through various trees, looking for something to consume or eat. What drives that process? Hunger, the search for pleasure. So, see, Shelley's got a question here. Can you say kama upadana as well? I've never heard that. So, and it's probably difficult to type, but it's comma with a long A, just for reference. K, see if my keyboard let me do this. A-M-A, comma. So, oops. So that's the proper spelling there for people interested. See, I lost my place in the chat here. Comic debt. Scott has something to share here. When I'm aware of a rising sense desire, I often have the felt sense of restriction. One of the ways I notice is there's this feeling of lack, and I love that word. It's a nice little 4-letter word, lack. You just feel like something's missing. There's just, and that's how the wanting or the desire manifests. You don't feel contented. You feel like you want somehow life to be a little different, and sometimes like it doesn't even have a very clear object. It's discontent. There's dissonance. I like this. That's one of the other words I like to use. It's a dissonance. There's many types of dissonance, but Kamachanda in particular, I sort of link to this kind of sense of lack. That's really, it's hungering for pleasantness with the deluded notion that that will make one happy. No, it might bring some pleasantness, but it won't make you happy. I think of Kamachanda as stickiness. The mind gets stuck to something and can't drop it. Well, yeah, it's the quality of attachment. Like, and that's very noticeable when stronger forms of Kamachanda have arisen. We're obsessed. I mean, like there's some experience or something that we long for, and the rose-colored glasses are on. We see it as wholly good, a positive. The mind's working overtime trying to justify and magnify the rightness of it, why it is we should do that or have that or be that. So, Okay, well, we're coming up on 8:30, so we're gonna maybe end that for today. Uh, I I hope people enjoy this exploration. I'm gonna stick with this for a little while. It'd be nice to move back to something completely spontaneous, but I think the value of lingering on the hindrances for a while and mulling this over and sharing some interaction with how it is that we work with it is useful, um, and especially useful to kind of revisit these similes and images that the Buddha has. So I wish you all well. Have a good day, and I will see you tomorrow, Monday morning at 8 o'clock. So be well, friends.